I don't know if Bloomberg is a conservative outlet. I don't think it is. I think it's like middle of the road. But they have this article from today. The dream of $15 minimum wage gets a reality check from inflation. And I think there's some really great points to be made. And I love talking about this concept for one simple reason. I've had a lot of people say to me, Tim, you're against a federal minimum wage of $15. That must mean you're a conservative. I said, no, it doesn't. First of all, I'm a centrist. God, how many times do I have to say it? Forgive me. The point is, just because you don't agree with this doesn't mean you're not liberal or you don't want people's wages to go up. The difference is you have a more right-wing approach, which is the free market will provide, and the left-wing approach, which is we must intervene in some circumstances. Depending on how far left you get, the reason I say left in that capacity, that's where I'm at. Like, sometimes we need intervention. Sometimes. I am not a laissez-faire person because I think it results in a system where it's not so much about wages. It's about what are we as a people doing. Think about this. And this is why I think there's a lot of conservatives who aren't overtly laissez-faire either. Young people polled in the US want to be YouTubers. Young people polled in China want to be astronauts. The things we want based off of rampant consumerism are not always going to be good things. And that's when I think we need something to say hard cultural shift. Now, of course, there's a laissez-faire argument for nonprofits and for the wealthy to step up and for philanthropy. I completely agree with that, but I do think we need a cohesive culture that can say, while we don't believe in authoritarian incentives, which would be like pointing the gun at somebody, to an extent we do, right? But I'm not talking about authority, I'm talking about authoritarianism. Imagine if the government only ever pointed the gun at your face. No, the government in the US will do tax incentives. Like, okay, I'll tell you what. You don't got to pay as many taxes if you do X. Or grants. Tell you what, we'll actually give you money if you do this. So there's ways to incentivize behavior that are positive that I think work out, which puts me in, kind of like a little left camp. However, I think the federal minimum wage as it stands today makes no sense because of technology, because of automation, and because of the rapid transit of wealth and resources through digital means. That means we need a different solution, and I don't know if we have one from a technological standpoint and from a governmental standpoint. Perhaps the only thing we have now is supply and demand. That doesn't mean I appreciate just runaway capitalism where people are buying just ridiculous, I don't know. Look, we're headed towards a future where instead of colonizing the universe, we colonize virtual Skyrim. And it's fun, but should humanity just end there? I'd hate to think it will. I think people should have a choice, and if that's what happens to humans, it's rather sad. But I do believe there will always be a group of people who want to strive for something better, so maybe we'll be okay. But anyway, let's read a little bit about this and learn about the inflation of the $15 minimum wage and the reality check. Bloomberg writes, for most of the decade, support for a $15 national minimum wage has grown among Democrats. Once seen as a fringe idea when it was introduced in 2012, at least 19 Democrats running for president in 2020 support the increase. They're going to lose support from every single small business in the country. I'm not even exaggerating. Every single one. Last week, the U.S. House passed a bill that would raise the minimum wage to that hourly rate by 2025, which could boost the incomes of 17 to 27 million workers, according to the Congressional Budget Office. But by then, inflation could make an increase of $15 seem like too little too late. And this is why Rashida Tlaib said we need a $20 minimum wage. But I'll tell you what, man, it'll never stop. The New York Times said 33. Well, why shouldn't everybody be a millionaire, right? From now on, everybody must pay $1 million to everybody. Then what? Then a box of cornflakes costs $1 million. Let's read on. Over the course of the U.S.'s 81-year history of a federal minimum wage, Congress has never introduced an automatic adjustment technique to let the minimum wage rise or fall in line with price changes. And that's one thing they're proposing, which is interesting. Instead, a series of irregular updates has instantly boosted the wage's purchasing power after varying periods of inflationary decline. The current $7.25 wage, for instance, is now worth 16% less than it was enacted in July of 2009. Proponents of a higher wage want to change all this by locking in wage increases for future years. There are two common ways to achieve this. Index to price inflation to guarantee the minimum wage can always afford the same theoretical basket of goods, or index to the increase in the median wage, which is an interesting idea. While the first approach means a minimum wage worker's standard of living remains flat, the second makes sure they share in any gains from a growing economy. The Raise the Wage Act passed by the House in July 18 would implement the latter strategy. But even though that represents the more aggressive indexing approach, The starting point for the new wage floor will have effectively fallen 20% since the debate began in earnest. By 2015, $15 an hour would be the equivalent of $11.93 in 2012. When the fight for 15 movement started, to truly reflect the original demand for 15, the Raise the Wage Act would need to call for $18.87 in 2025. $15 by 2025 is a very moderate standard for the country, said Paul Son, the state policy program director at the National Employment Law Project, a nonprofit firm that promotes workers' rights and backs the $15 wage. Even in the low-cost states, it's the minimum that workers will need by then to afford the basics. In the high-cost states, it's already not enough. Okay, before we move on, the problem is not a minimum. The problem is massive supply of low-skilled labor. The reason I think this won't work is that it's not going to change the fact that automation is displacing low-skilled labor while we have an immigration crisis. Low-skilled labor is abundant, and you can't increase the value of an hour, which means goods will stay the same. In fact, something bad's going to happen when we start seeing massive unemployment through automation, and we have undocumented migrants in this country, while Trump's trying to deal with those things, which is interesting. My opinion on Trump's strategy, though, is that he's looking backward. I think backward's the wrong way to phrase it. In some regards, he's looking backwards, but I think he's looking for a physical response. Andrew Yang is looking for a technological or policy-based response. So it's interesting. I get it, Trump's enacting policy, but Trump's looking at strengthening the borders, limiting free trade agreements, tariffs, deportations, etc., stopping the migrant crisis. Andrew Yang is looking at like UBI. Now, in the end, I think Trump has it right for the short term, but I'm still concerned that American citizens are not being prepared for, or they're not being taken care of for the long haul. I'm not saying Trump is wrong to be doing what he's doing, by no means. I think a lot of what he's doing will work. I think he needs someone like Yang now to start the conversation in the future. So one of the reasons I've supported Yang is not because I believe he'll be president. I don't think he will. I'm not delusional. I would still support him, hoping he has a chance. But in the end, I really don't think he'd make it. And he's not my first choice. But he is starting a conversation, even if that's all he does. So I'm hoping to see him on the debate stage to talk about these ideas. And I'm hoping he will have influence on the next president, be it Trump or whoever else, though I think it will be Trump. I think in the end, we need a multifaceted approach to this. Trump is right when he talks about these free trade agreements and the loss of factories. Full stop. Makes a ton of sense. Companies are not paying for healthcare. They're paying trash wages in foreign countries and then shipping products here, and it's a drain on the economy. Bring the job back, and you will see wages go up. Now we need to prepare for automation. So Trump is taking care of the physical response. And I can say, great, the economy is doing well. It seems like some of the stuff he's doing makes sense. There's definitely criticism to go around on the immigration debate for him and the Democrats, mostly on the Democrats, though. But in the end, are we going to deal with the issue of technology? So I tell you, you know what I would love to see? Andrew Yang appointed some kind of job and economics position for future technology, and Tulsi Gabbard as like Secretary of State or something. That'd be great. And then you'd have a check on Trump, and you'd have some principled people in the positions they should be in. I think most people would agree, conservative or otherwise, that Tulsi would be better than, what's John Bolton? Is John Bolton Secretary of State? Whatever. The point is, Tulsi Gabbard being that whisper in Trump's ear about not going to war. Andrew Yang being that whisper in Trump's ear about making sure he's paying attention to the future and forward-thinking, economies. And then I'm fairly happy, mostly because that's a pull on Trump policy-wise and good advice that I think would work. And I'm willing to compromise, man. I don't think, the reaction from Democrats to like deal with Trump is just impeach. And I'm like, not a solution, not an argument. Okay, get rid of the guy by voting and present me someone with some good ideas. And those are the people I think have good ideas, but I'm willing to take compromises, put them in the positions that make sense. But let's move on. Basically, I think you get the point. I don't want to drive this one into the ground. The point is, what's being brought up here is simply that by the time they enact the $15 wage, it's already worthless. It's not worth enough. So they're running after the clock. There's some good ideas here, but they basically go into detail talking about this. The reason I thought that was important to talk about is that it doesn't matter how much they increase the wage and when they do, it's not going to get them the outcome they want. It's going to result in inflation, and this is why they keep demanding more money. Here's the thing. He talks about pegging the base rate to a supply of goods. Okay. Then when you increase it and the supply and basic goods like milk, bread, and eggs go up, You've then got to increase it again, which will then make it go up. And you'll just infinitely be increasing the price. And that's what we see in these ridiculous countries like Venezuela, where you have garbage bags full of cash to buy a slice of bread. So it doesn't work. It may have made sense. It makes sense by jurisdiction. It makes sense by industry. It doesn't make sense nationally as a blanket for a one-size-fits-all. It's bad policy. We need to consider that there's different cost of livings in different parts of the country, and we can't just make everyone do the exact same thing because it's a huge country. So anyway, I'll leave it there. Next segment will be tomorrow at 10 a.m. The podcast every day at 6:30 p.m. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all next time.